Hey there, everybody. It's great to see all of you. This is Michael Bracy with the Music Policy Forum, and I am thrilled to welcome everybody to this special MPF lab, where today we're talking about the Revs initiative. We're talking about what we've done, what's been some of the high points and some of the challenges, and really focusing in on what this experience has really meant for all of us as we think about our broader sort of long-term horizon around the work that we all do in the music community to try to build stronger, more resilient, and more equitable music ecosystems. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. This program, again, is being recorded and it's going to be archived on the Music Policy Forum website. The hope is over time, if people in the future want to know what Revs is all about, in 5-10 years can go back and find this video and get a sense of who we were and what we're all up to. Over the next hour, we're going to be talking to a bunch of our pilot leaders, a bunch of our national program leaders, some of our global partners, just to get their perspective on, again, what the last 19 months have meant to them in terms of this initiative and how it informs our work moving forward. At 5 o'clock Eastern, we're going to stop this part of the program. We're going to shut down this Zoom room, and those who are interested are going to go to a different Zoom room, which our amazing producer, Alex, will put the link information, registration information into the chat. And we're going to have an informal happy hour and just a chance to visit with everybody and catch up and say hi. So for about an hour, we're going to have conversations and presentations. And then again, we're going to pivot over to a happy hour, which everyone is more than welcome to join. We'd love to see all of you who'd like to join us. As always, we so appreciate your time. We know everybody in this community is extraordinarily busy. Especially these days, things just seem bananas. If you're so inclined, feel free to put into the chat your name and where you're joining us from. It's always great to see the range of places where people are coming in and participating in these programs. If you have pressing questions, you can always use the Q&A window, and we'll try to get to those as we go. And I think that's it for housekeeping. So we all know everybody loves a PowerPoint. So to kick things off, I am going to share my screen, and we are going to do a very quick PowerPoint overview of a little bit about what we've been up to, what we've been trying to accomplish, and where we are, and particularly where we're going. So, and this is, again, many of you in the Zoom, you've lived this for 19 months, so you know it really well. For those of you who are coming to this fresh, or this may be new information, we founded this back in April of 2020, really with the inspiration of and the leadership of Kate Becker and a lot of the folks in King County, where, of course, in North America, the pandemic was hitting first. And really, we had these core basic ideas. We knew that live music will be shut down. We also knew that at some point live music was going to reopen. And we wanted to think about, what do we control? What do we have opportunities to have a leverage over to make sure that we can reopen as quickly and as safely as possible, but only when the science allows us to. And then we wanted to think about, how do we talk about this with critical stakeholders, with musicians and venue employees and audiences? What are these communications challenges going to look like, and how do we do this? And then we're taking that basic idea. We decided that we could do this through a cohort of pilot communities that all would be kind of exploring these issues in real time together. Because again, this has been uncharted territory, and it's been awful. It's been awful for a long time for a lot of people. But we were really thankful that these communities, these 11 cities, all signed up to be our initial 2020 pilots. And they all, as again, many of you know who've been on this journey, you know that they've had different types of leadership. Some were led by nonprofit music advocacy organizations. Some were led by local government. Some were led by arts agencies. And throughout 2020, again, all of these cities worked with our national leaders to try to figure this stuff out. And really, this kind of, you can boil down to three kind of core concepts. The first is, again, trying to engage with and respond to local, state, regional health protocols. Just try to say, who's making decisions in our community? What do they need to know? How does that relate to venues? What does the evolving science look like? What is the pandemic doing? And then how do we engage ourselves in a very meaningful way with these different stakeholder groups? In some places, these relationships already existed. In some places, this is completely new thinking. We'll hear some perspectives today from groups who had different sort of entry points in this. but how do we engage and talk about this collaboratively to try to solve these challenges? And again, how do we talk about it, right? How do we think about messaging and communications assets and different ways of getting stories out there? So that's what we tried to do. And again, for those of you who are on this journey, when we started this in April of 2020, we thought this would be a 9-month problem, right? We're thinking Thanksgiving 2020, we're going to be back at it. We're just going to bing, bang, boom, off to the races. And of course, going through the arcs like all of us have gone through have been exhausting and really hard. But I think all of us, or many of us in the Revs community, would be thankful, again, that we've had each other to kind of lean on and support ourselves in real time as we've gone through this. As we went into 2021, again, recognizing that this stupid frickin' pandemic was not over, and of course still is not over, we redoubled our efforts heading into this year. We strengthened our national leadership team, not only with the Music Policy Forum board members like me, Kate Hakeem, Anna, Ashley, and Danny Grant is on this. I'm sorry, Danny needs to be here. But we also were really happy to welcome others, including Dena Morris, who hopefully we'll hear from later today, musicians like Cole Williams and Zach Schwartz, who hopefully we'll hear from Zach today. And we brought in other pilot cities: Anchorage, Alaska, Boise, Idaho, the Northwest Arkansas region, Pittsburgh, Sacramento, Tucson. And we, again, redoubled our efforts and kind of continued the process of figuring out what do we do. So what do we learn? We learned a lot, and these 5 bullet points don't really do it justice, but they're just an entry point for the conversations we're going to have today. The first, I think we knew, but it was, again, reinforced. The music community, it's language that we always use and talk about a lot. It is a community. It is a diverse group of individuals with different perspectives and different roles in the ecosystem that want to come together to lift each other up, to try to solve these challenges, to be for each other, to be support networks, to share best practices, to troubleshoot problems. It really is a community, and it was remarkable and very heartening to kind of see that play out in real time over the last 19 months. The second, again, is that the community engagement and ecosystem approach that we've been developing at Music Policy Forum since 2017 is fundamentally sound. The idea of trying to go out to different types of stakeholders to ask them to contribute what they can in terms of their areas of expertise, their knowledge, their perspectives, their resources, their talents, understanding the gaps in their knowledge, really trying to fit together these complicated puzzles that make up a music ecosystem. It works. And I think we saw a lot of that in the Revs work, that it really does take these different sectors all coming together to try to solve problems or address issues related to music. And that was exciting to see. The third was a surprise to me, because I'm a Luddite. And I really give a lot of credit to Gigi Johnson and others for helping me get my head around this. But Zoom has been a transformative tool to help grow and foster and bring together these geographically diverse collaborations. This is stuff that you can't do, being together at a conference twice a year, or you can't do on conference calls. It just doesn't work. And again, we'll talk about this more in today's program, but the ability to see each other's faces, to have the tools that Zoom and other technologies offer, allowed us to do real-time, meaningful collaboration in ways that were really unthinkable before the pandemic. And so that has completely cracked our skulls open as we think about what our organized models look like as we move forward. Then two that are what they are, right? And this is not, Revs is not all shiny, happy, fun times, not only because of the gravity of the work involved, but also the organizing effort. The work of music advocacy, of infrastructure building, of agenda setting, of policy work, it still is not widely understood, and it is challenging to fund. And one of the great frustrations of this effort that we may get into later today was our inability to kind of raise the kind of resources necessary to not only take some of these amazing ideas and case studies and best practices developed in the Revs pilot cities and really make them more widely accessible and understood in all the other thousands of American cities that did not have a Revs pilot. And so this is something that we collectively need to be very mindful of moving forward, that we have to get people to understand that this work, again, agenda setting, coalition building, sharing best practices, research, documentation, it is work. And it's important, and we have to figure out better funding streams to build this infrastructure. Because God knows we had probably a couple dozen more people who worked in our pilots who are not in pilot cities, but would have loved to be paid to do this work and take it to another level. And that was something we were just not able to execute at the type of level we needed to. And that gets to the second, challenge again, which is that there are limits to volunteer labor. And again, Revs is a volunteer operation. We're proud of that. We don't shy away from that. But again, at some point, you just run into your limits and bump into walls. And ultimately, if you believe and are passionate about the mission of what you're trying to do, you got to get it funded to scale so people can do it, and not as volunteers, but as part of their job. So what's next for us? This is, again, super short, right? I mean, this is I could spend an hour talking to you about what's next for MPF and where we're headed. But just to keep things brief and crisp and to the point for today's conversation, obviously, we're not walking away from reopening. These issues are still critical. They're still important. Even though we are sunsetting Revs as a formal kind of national networking cohort, we are participating in a meeting next Friday, October 29th, that the city of Tucson is helping organize for Southern Arizona arts groups. We are still engaged in this stuff. Call us anytime, right? We are not walking away from this. But we are getting back to our core mission, and we're broadening. And we're broadening from a sense of strength because we have relationships and tools and strategies that we really didn't have before the pandemic. So again, the goal is not get back to where we were in December of 2019. The goal is what it always has been for Music Policy Forum and other like-minded organizations, is to build stronger, more resilient, and more equitable music ecosystems, and to think about where are the places where we need to be making an impact, can be making an impact, and how do we engage in that. So again, we're not walking away from reopening, but we also are ready to hit the gas. We're going to be continuing our virtual convenings in 22 and beyond. Again, that's going to be a monthly version of our Music Policy Forum Live program and our Music Policy Forum Labs. And we're going to be getting back to in person. And we are not ready to formally announce anything today. But what I can share is that if any of you in a Revs pilot or in a community that is not formally part of a Revs pilot, but part of our network, if you want to host a delegation, if you want to bring us to town, if you want to go see places, we are so excited to be back in person, seeing people face to face, and getting back to that very important part of our organizing model and our mission. And finally, as I referenced, we're broadening our networks to go beyond reopening. And one of the things we're excited about is a lot of people who are participating in today's meeting have a lot to offer beyond reopening. And so while, again, reopening has been and needs to be the primary focus and has been certainly of the Revs initiative, I can't wait to talk about the creative youth development sector, about the future of public media, about infrastructure issues and how we define cultural infrastructure, about how future technologies can have artists and musicians centered in those conversations, all the things we're passionate about, Music Policy Forum, and bringing a lot of you who we met through this journey at Revs into this. You know us through the reopening context, but we haven't had a chance to work together on some of these broader issues that we're really passionate about, and that's going to be super fun. So finally, most of you know this. If you're new to, again, this work, or if you're finding this work in the future, all of our content is archived, thanks to Alex Dolvin and his consistent work. So we have over 100 hours of conversations around these issues archived at musicpolicyforum.org. And you can always email us at musicpolicyforum@gmail.com and keep in touch. Let us know what we're up to, what you're up to, and how it can work together. So with that spectacular PowerPoint presentation, I'm really excited to, again, go around the horn with some of the guests that we're excited to bring to you today. Folks that have been critical partners, not only in the Revs work, but in broader work. We're going to start across the pond. Mark Davyd with the Music Venue Trust. Mark and Bev and the team at Music Venue Trust have been our core partners in the UK's Revs initiative. And Mark, you've got I think you got a PowerPoint or something to share as well. But thanks for staying up late and joining us as always. Great to see you. Take it away.
Love to see you too, Michael. I think you've summed up pretty well why we became involved with Revs in that opening presentation. That we weren't trying to reinvent everything. We were trying to learn from what everybody else was doing as fast as we possibly could. I think you described the problems very well there. I have got a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not actually sure how to do this, but I'm going to try. Probably Michael will have to tell me whether it's working or not. There we go. Share. And then, has that worked?
Yep, looks great.
Great, fantastic. Okay, so Music Venue Trust is a not-for-profit. I'm sure most of you know this by now. Based in the UK, we have 928 music venue members spread across the country. And what I'm going to do today is just, I'm picking up, rather than do an entire new presentation that I didn't have time to do, like most of you, I'm very busy. We recently held our first in-person event since reopening, Venues Day 2021. That's when we have our annual national gathering of music venues. We had 900 delegates this year, came together in London. Nearly 500 music venues were represented, huge rack of partners, more than we've ever had before. And what we focused on was most of our members understand what Revs was, what our policies were to reopen every venue safely. They've been through a whole thing with us. What we wanted to tell them about and what we really want to tell you about is what was the impact of Revs and where is that leading us, as Michael said there, where are we going next? So these are our numbers as the outcome of the reopen every venue safely. We had a series of campaigns, both to prevent the closure of venues, to try to protect jobs, premises within our sector, and then also to campaign around how to reopen every venue safely, how to bring live music back, because most of you will have experienced what we like to call grit in the machinery, which is even though the premises might have been saved, the people who worked in those premises had frequently had to go and get other jobs. They didn't know how to restart. Artists didn't know how to restart. So these are our numbers that you can see on screen there. Save Our Venues was our first campaign while we were waiting for government to do something. £5 million was raised from artists, industry and the public. The Revive Live campaign was £1.26 million we raised from the National Lottery, which was invested in removing that grip from machinery, literally spent on van hires, rehearsal rooms, spaces just to be able to get bands back together, taking them off their jobs they'd taken at Amazon and delivery companies, get them back holding the bass guitar in their hands. As a result of our Reopen Every Venue Safely work, how we learned to speak to government, how we did that conversation that Michael was talking about, over £70 million was raised for venues in England, Scotland and Wales. That came through public funding, through the conversation we had with government. We also raised over £65 million from retail, hospitality and leisure grants, restrictions grants. We became a machine, frankly, for identifying where the grant money was, how it could be applied to us. And as a result of our work to prevent the closure of venues, we raised £140 million. And there's a really interesting stat at the bottom there. Pre-COVID, only 3% of our venues had received any public funding at all in the last 10 years. As a result of COVID and a result of the work that we did through the Revs initiative, that figure is now 71% of our venues receive some kind of funding. Why did we do that is the most important thing to us. 83% of our 928 members faced closure. That's 770 venues we thought would probably close as a result of this crisis. And as of the 30th of September, only 4 venues actually closed their doors to live music. And in fact, only 2 of those have properly closed. 2 of them have stopped doing live music. 2 of them have actually closed down. We're trying to persuade the 2 that haven't closed down to reintroduce live music. And today I've been working on trying to get some funding for them to persuade them back into the live music arena. So for us, Revs was an incredibly successful enterprise. And, you know, it was so important for us to learn from what everybody else was doing. We picked up so many ideas from around the world. So that was the impact of Revs. Where does that leave us is where we're moving on to now. Most of our venues are reopened already. We have one particular problem in Northern Ireland where they're still mucking around with restrictions, but most of them are reopened. Interestingly, certainly in England, the reopening is massively successful. I spoke to one venue owner today. They've just had their busiest 3-month period in 20 years of trading. So it really is a huge comeback. But despite all that money being raised, the sector is now £90 million in debt that it wasn't before. Huge percentage of that is owed to landlords. A couple of other things to tell you from our experience. Noise complaints are an epidemic now. People who grew used to living in a slightly quieter part of town than perhaps it should have been now feel emboldened to make complaints again. We have, as you may be seeing from your news, we have an almost post-vaccine outbreak. We have about 86.5% of our over 18s are double vaccinated, but we still have about 50,000 cases a day. And that's causing the government to talk about a plan B, which we're trying to avoid social distancing and just simple closures. We also have different versions of what's being done. Scotland and Wales have a really bizarre set of rules around COVID pass. It's not being applied unilaterally. It's being applied at certain times of day to certain types of venues, meeting certain criteria, which really isn't helping the public understand it. Rescheduled shows are very difficult. Staffing is unbelievably problematic, and train security. It is reckoned that around about 60% of our train security left the industry during this crisis. And more worrying than that, 35% of all our trainers left the industry during this crisis. So we are actually having trouble training people to become security. So we as an organization have been looking at what are we going to do in 2022? What should we campaign on? We're bringing back to normality, as it was before this crisis, things like our emergency response service, the information advice and guidance, centralizing partnerships with key stakeholders, brand and sponsor opportunities. You know, I'm not a massive fan of Ticketmaster. I'm sure a lot of people in this conversation aren't, but we do use them as brand partners to make things happen that are positive for venues. Same with Amazon Music, lots of different partnerships there. And we will be staging more in-person events. And one of those is we really want to do an online version of Venues Day and Venues Day International, which we wanted to do in October, but not enough countries are in the right place to do that yet. And then our 22 campaigns, we have a property tax called business rates. It's completely counterintuitive to operate that in grassroots music venues. We're trying to get that actually cancelled. The sales tax, VAT, as it is in England, we're trying to eliminate that from grassroots ticketing. We have a really aggressive team now. 71% of our venues were funded during the crisis. We think at least 71% of them, if not more, should be funded after the crisis. Now it's accepted that public funding should be in our sector. We want to keep it there. We are looking at the lessons to be learnt from an airborne pathogen. We want a major national scheme to improve air quality. We're in discussions with government to create a £14 million scheme to install ventilation into all of our member venues under public funding. And then finally, the one I really want to pick up on, which is I'm going to do a bit more expansive stuff on if I've got time, is ownership. We want to remove commercial landlords from the sector. 93% of the grassroots music venue sector in England are tenants. They don't own their own buildings. They have an unbelievable 19 months left on their tenancy. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to get kicked out in 19 months, but they will face rent reviews. They may face lower terms and conditions. They may be asked to do refurbishments. Landlords should not have the upper hand in cultural infrastructure, in our opinion. We are a grassroots sector that does research and development. We are too often seen as commercially viable. But the truth is that when it comes to live music, ticket sales, 129 million, show costs 162 million. We are losing money presenting research and development for the rest of the music industry to eventually make money out of. We've had a huge turnaround in people becoming not-for-profits, now up to 26%. So over a quarter of our members are now not-for-profits. We are convinced that the COVID crisis did not create a challenge of ownership. It simply placed a magnifying glass on it. So we are moving towards a benevolent ownership model, which will have lower rent, insurance and repair contributions, which none of our commercial landlords make, flexible rent arrangements. We've created an entity called Music Venue Properties, which is another not-for-profit, which we have a controlling interest in. I'm not going to run through the whole of this slide because I want to be as brief as I can, but it's basically, excuse me, It's a complete not-for-profit. The idea is the freeholds of these buildings are owned by this entity, which is a community share. The shares and the capital are raised from the public and from ultra high net worth individuals, or from corporations, or from donations. This probably sounds quite out there. It really isn't. All we've done is identify something that was already happening. There has been over £220 million raised to fund this kind of community ownership in the last 10 years. We want to raise almost that amount of money to buy freeholds and remove most of our sector from that. It is a long-established idea. The first one with cooperative movements in 1844, believe it or not. It is a massive potential. The largest one in the UK is the Housing Finance Corporation that has £7.9 billion worth of properties and buildings. We have a new campaign and it's called Own Our Venues. We think it's the most important thing that we can do to really come back better out of this crisis and to take forward our sector. So we are focusing on that as a solution, not only to COVID, but to solving a lot of other problems that we have. Fast enough, Michael?
Yeah, no, that's totally on point. And I just love seeing the comments in the chat. I think people are really tracking. And I think it, in terms of today's conversation, really reinforces again why here in the United States, we need to be, of course, we need to be doing the day by day discussion about how are we just getting to tomorrow, which unfortunately is still such a, front of mind for everybody. But we also can't be missing the broader context. And again, if you go back through the archive of this programming, something we said since, April of 2020 is that the federal government is spending massive amounts of resources, and it falls upon us as a community to think about where we fit into the context of that investment. And it's that kind of thinking that led to the $16.25 billion for the shuttered venue operator grants, which again, as we keep saying, more money than the 50-year combined history of the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. So just a complete recalibration of type of money can go into the system. Now it's very likely, and Dena Morris will roll her eyes, because she's heard me say this, all year, but it's very likely that, we are going to get another infrastructure investment going. It'll be about $1.9 trillion, give or take. Same thing. We need to learn from what you guys are thinking about and some of your framework and be thinking about where does that fit into American context around some of these broader structural issues. Because again, we need to be very mindful not to just try to replicate where we were before COVID. We've got to really be thinking about where we want to go and the power of the network, through Revs and these related organizational relationships. It really needs to be moving on that. So Mark, as always, we could talk to you all night. We would love to talk to you all night. I don't know if you'll be able to join us in the half hour and be part of our happy hour conversation, because I know a lot of people want to pick your brains. But thank you for you and Bev and your entire team. It's always great to hear from you, and be well.
Thank you, Michael.
So now we're going to go to a couple of our American pilot projects. We're going to start with our Seattle and King County pilot project with the indomitable Kate Becker, our partner here at Music Policy Forum. And Kate, why don't I let you just drive the car for a little while and bring in Scott and Dena and talk a little bit about your experience in King County, what the Revs Initiative has meant for you all, and really the fact that you guys are actually going to be continuing to kind of meet as a cohort moving forward as we go through this process.
Sure, great. Thank you so much, Michael, and not daunting to follow you and Mark Davyd at all. But anyhow, delighted to be here with you all, and I would invite you, Scott, and you, Dena, to join me on the screen right now. My name is Kate Becker. I'm from Seattle and King County, and hi, Dena. Hi, Scott. These are my primary collaborators in the Revs Initiative. When the pandemic first started, we realized right away that it could pose an existential threat to live music venues. There was that time before vaccines where we really didn't know where we were going. And so the threat was very, very real. And we pulled together locally to figure out how we were going to work with venue owners and successfully try to navigate this pandemic. So I reached out to Scott and to Dena, who both readily said they would join this effort. Scott is the nightlife business advocate in the city of Seattle and has long worked in the nighttime economy and culture and been a longtime collaborator. And Dena, who I did not know as well, but she comes from a public health background. And so she joined this effort. She ran the CDC in Washington, D.C. at one point. She ran Washington Global Health out here. So she has this public health background that neither Scott nor I had. So she was a tremendous collaborator to join this effort. And then I worked for the King County Executive, Dow Constantine, as the Creative Economy and Recovery Director for the county. King County is a large county, bigger than 12 states, if you can believe it, in the United States. And the executive is a music-loving politician. I am in the right seat to be doing political work right now because he understands the importance of keeping our music sector going, of keeping our live music venues going. And we're really honored and proud to put the first public funding forward in the country to help stabilize live music venues back in May of 2020. So he also, my boss, Dow, also oversees public health. So it's been sort of a funny spot to be in, right? Because we need to uphold the public health protocols, of course, which are very different than what Mark Davyd described as happening in the UK. Here we do have a vaccine verification mandate that goes into effect on the 25th of this month. We've had a masking mandate for some time. We've had restrictions on capacity, all of which have impacted our venues. So, working together, we brought together a group of a combination of music venue owners and operators, some community leaders around tourism and culture, as well as really Dena was our public health representative on a regular basis, but we brought in some specialists, which I think Scott will speak to as we move forward. So, we've had 43 main meetings of the Revs initiative here, of the local team here, and we are not winding ours down. We are modifying ours to go into a monthly meeting with these folks because even though we're ending the national Revs initiative locally, there is a desire for us to continue meeting and working together. And fortunately, both Dena and Scott have volunteered their efforts to continue doing that. So I think I'll leave that at that. And Scott, you want to take it from here? I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'm talking rather fast.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Great way to summarize all of that. I would, in structuring this out and how we wanted to move this forward, I think we realized very early on that we wanted it to be a fairly organic and community-driven process. And so while Dena, Kate, and I would come up with suggested agenda items and things like that, often the agendas for our meetings and with the direction in which we were going was driven by our group and the questions that arose. And one thing that came up very quickly was, even though King County was the very first place in the country to have a case, and so we were very fortunate that we had a governor and a county executive and a mayor of Seattle who were kind of Johnny on the spot right away, working collaboratively and working to protect the citizenry. But there was still a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation, and trying to navigate all of that could be difficult. And so what we found quickly was that one of the things that Revs could do best would be to be facilitators of information and communication. And so we, I think one of the hallmarks of what we did in our time was connecting to the experts and the people who could come and talk to us and give us that information directly. So right off the bat, we had Kate's colleague, Kirsten Weissen from King County Public Health, who was meeting with us pretty much, I believe, regularly for the first few weeks or months of this to provide information to our stakeholders on what was happening in the newest updates with COVID and as it dragged on, what was going on. But we also had other health specialist, Dr. Ali Mokdad of the IHME, and Kate, help me here, I'm not quite sure what that acronym is.
It's the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. Awesome.
To come and provide more information on the COVID and what was happening. We had legal questions around reopening and what one could or could not do in terms of, at that time we were still looking at, can you keep people from coming in or not? And what are your liabilities around that and people getting sick in your business? So we invited Roger Cohen, who was attorney here, to come and try to answer a lot of those legal questions for our stakeholders. We had other, when we were getting to the point where resources were starting to become a little bit more plentiful or there were more opportunities for resources from the SBA or from the state, we would invite people like Cynthia Cowell from the SBA to talk about the SVOG grants. And we had Rob Zur from the Washington Department of Commerce, who came to talk about the Washington State small business grants that were open at the time and were available to our stakeholders. So just really concentrating on providing that information. We also, at the end, or toward the last few months, when we started realizing that there was going to be this mask mandate, and also that we were leaning towards a vaccine mandate, what did that mean? What was going to happen with that? We also had Becky Wright from King County Health come as well to discuss what was happening with that. So just really funneling in information. I think that was a big portion of what we were doing. It was great. We learned tons from the fabulous Mr. Mark Davyd, who came to us, I think at least twice, if not three times, to provide us with the overview of what was happening in the UK, which was super valuable for us in how we were moving forward with our mask mandates and reopenings and vaccines, and just learning what was happening there and best practices. And then, of course, we had our great compatriots from other Revs teams that would meet with us regularly, including Scotty Haulter from Louisville and Mark O'Shea from Cleveland, Akron team, as well as others from Austin who would drop in every once in a while. And I think we had some folks from Alaska come in. So really just kind of keeping it open, keeping it fluid, and keeping the information going. And then ultimately, the last thing that we did that I will let Dena discuss, I think is sort of the shining crown of what we did with Revs.
So I don't know if the opposite of a short straw is the long straw, but I got it because I get to talk about the party. So as Scott was saying, we really took our cue from the membership and from the engaged group that showed up every week. And one of the things that came up regularly was concern for the health and well-being of the venue staff. As you all know, the venue staff is a close, tight family. And when there was no ability to speak with each other, to be with each other for over a year, spirits were flagging, and there was a lot of concern. So what we did was we threw a party, and we threw it around the theme of health and wellness, and as a celebration of emerging from the shutdown and being able to come back to work and to be together. And Mark Davyd was kind enough to let us use his clever name, which was Revive Live Music. So we used that as the organizing theme. And then our group totally pitched in. And I know it's dangerous to start making specific thanks because I'm going to leave out a million people, but I do want to shout out to Six Zulu for lending us their site and tons of person hours and helping us secure music. We had live music. And also Taste of the Caribbean, who made some amazing foods. Everyone had things that they could eat. One of the things we did in addition to celebrating was we put resource tables. We invited partners to come and have resource tables so that venue workers had places they could go to get information. And the highlight of that, of course, was the Adopt a Kitten table. So Thank you all. It was wonderful. And it was a great way to bring everybody off of the Zoom screen and into a live place. Sorry. Can I say one more thing? I also wanted to do a shout out to Scotty Haulter because we were having trouble raising money to pay the musicians and some of the things that we needed to do. And Scotty dug into his own pocket and put money on the table, and that opened a little pipeline of other people digging into their pocket and putting money on the table. So we ended up being fine. Thank you, Scotty.
Well, that's a really good segue because we're going to thank Kate and Scott and Dena. And I just want to, again, reemphasize that, I've been really fortunate to be part of many of the Seattle Revs and King County Revs meetings. And just, Zoom is so awkward and so uncomfortable, but you do get a sense of knowing people and you get to meet people and getting a sense to, ability to, spend that time with a lot of people in the community and know that, again, like, I know the people in Seattle and King County probably, get tired of hearing how great they are in terms of their music ecosystem and infrastructure. But it is, an international model for a lot of us. And so to get a sense, to be able to be a fly on the wall and see how that's working and talk to a lot of people and hopefully I know a bunch of Seattle King County folks are with us today and hopefully they'll be able to join us, in 20 minutes, just for some face-to-face. Kate, you've got your hand up.
10 seconds to just say, and Michael Bracy joined us at the top of all 43 meetings to bring a national perspective on what was happening with the Revs initiative. And we can't thank you enough, Michael.
Well, that means that people got to hear me be wrong 43 times in a row, but still it's really fun. So thank you, Seattle King County. I know you'll be able to join us in a little bit for happy hour. And I want to bring in Scotty Haulter from Louisville, who Dena just shouted out. And one of the great things again about Revs, and really is core to our work at Music Policy Forum, we always joke that there's a fine line between a network and a clique. And one of the challenges in doing this music policy work is that you see the same faces, the same conversations, and we're always really eager to kind of grow and expand and get to know new people. And Revs was a remarkable opportunity to make some relationships and meet some people. And Scotty is high on the list along with a lot of other people. I'm not going to name names because I'll get in trouble again. But Scotty was one of the leaders of the Louisville, Kentucky Revs pilot. Welcome, Scotty. Thanks for joining today.
Hey, thanks, Michael. And thanks, Seattle King County for the shout out. Y'all are too kind.
Well, so Scotty, for those who hadn't had a chance to meet you, just give us a quick thumbnail of the work that you've done in your career. What do you do in Louisville, and how did you kind of fit into the Louisville? Why did it make sense for you to be involved in the Louisville Revs pilot?
A little short synopsis of my career: tour manager, agent, production manager, venue manager. Why it made sense for me is that I felt like I had a real well-rounded scope from all sides of where everybody was coming from, and was honored to be, for Louisville to be reached out as one of the 11 pilot cities meant a lot. And I thought that Louisville could do a good job if we all got together, which, Michael, we had never formed a community like that. We have a lot of different size venues, and some venues are restaurants and venues, and, some of them are performing arts centers. We had just never got together to fight something like this before. Thankfully, it never had to happen before, but, so we formed a nice community, which the word is used a lot, community, and we all came together, and not only just Louisville locally, but just the relationships from all around the country. I know that many people from around the country have joined my local meetings that I was doing weekly and things like that. And I'm appreciative of that, but that's why I got involved in that. I just really wanted to be part of the importance of reopening live music.
And I think the Louisville pilot is interesting from my standpoint as an organizer for a couple of reasons. I don't think I'm speaking out of school, to say that Louisville became a pilot because the mayor found out about the opportunity And the mayor wanted Louisville to be part of the network, went to the local tourism agency to say, okay, could you guys be our main source of contact? They got engaged, and then they really felt strongly like they wanted people who were connectors in the industry itself, you know, who really understood the mechanics of it, which is, you know, kind of how you got brought in. And I think that, you know, one of the things that's been, you know, so exciting about Revs is to see how, you know, Revs and Music Policy Forum has been working at the same time that we see these other organizing efforts that we all are intersecting with. So not only, you know, NEVA, which we're really proud that so many NEVA leaders are part of the Revs initiative, but also people working around equity in music and people thinking about the future of public media. All these, you know, there are all these great sort of nascent organizing efforts. And part of what you model, and not just you, Scotty, obviously, but your community in Louisville, is the intersectionality of its, you know, one thing for venues to organize, but then it's venues to connect in with these different sectors and different stakeholders to sort of give an insight into what this could look like moving forward. And again, we all don't know what that looks like because we've been focused on reopening. But I'm so excited about, could you talk a little bit more about the way that you worked with other pilots to kind of think about this concept of you know, the Loves Network?
Absolutely.
And what that looks like?
Absolutely. I mean, right at the beginning of this, I reached out to Mark Thurman because I was really, really impressed with what he was putting together in his region. And it really it lit my candle to like, wow, I got to do this, and, you know, or at least try to do this in this city, you know. And like you mentioned, you know, Louisville tourism, you know, and I know we had never really talked to each other in this town, you know what I mean? Even though we knew the importance of what tourism and what live music and entertainment brings to the tourism, you know, field. But it was really great to just all of us come together and, you know, join, like you said, you know, integrate,
yeah,
you know, and put those pieces together to help one another and realize we're all in the same family here, you know, for sure.
And Scotty, that just makes us so happy to think about, because again, we founded Music Policy Forum in 2017 because we feel like that connectivity is what's been missing in our space. And to think about, again, the work that like Rick Thurman has been leading in Charlotte, which not a lot of people know about, you know, and Rick has been doing some remarkable organizing work, working with Don Pitts and others to kind of put some concrete strategies in place and really activate things for his music community, and the ability to build those tangible bridges that then lead to, you know, kind of inspiring, helping build out these models. Again, when we talk about what I talked about at the beginning of today's conversation, is we are just so excited about the untapped potential of all this work. And one thing, and I love seeing all the love for you, Scotty, in the chat, you know, and I think you've got a big fan club out there and across the globe, but, you know, you've been designated, you know, you're going to be the organizer of the Revs tour when we're all going to get on the van and we're going to go hang out with each other. So, you know, we look forward to following up with you. And
I love that, you know, hopefully it's a bus and not a van.
Yes, no, we'll get on the bus and we'll get back out there. So, yeah. So Scotty, thanks again for your time and commitment and passion. And, you know, just it's been just such a delight to get to know you, and, you know, all the things you're building at Louisville, and just, you know, the way that you've just been an inspiration for all of us, you know, in this community. So, and again, yeah, everybody wants on that bus, and Mark Davyd said he's flying in, and Christensen is daring us to drive to Anchorage. So we'll figure out the Anchorage piece, but.
Well, right back at you and everybody on this, and everybody part of Revs. It's been so much to me, and all the love right back to everybody, you know, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Scotty, thank you. And we're now going to bring in our good friend, Zach Schwartz, who many of you know professionally, under his music name, Zach Rogue, from the spectacular band Rogue Wave. Zach, are you still with us here?
Am I? Let's see.
There you are.
Am I here?
There you are, looking great. So part of what there are two kind of things I want to emphasize in bringing Zach in. The first is part of what made Revs so dynamic and interesting and exciting. Again, was the reality, as I said before. You know, the work is awful, right? Because the things that there were no answers on any of this work. And, you know, we had sort of incremental successes and things we're proud of. And certainly I think all of us who are part of the Revs community felt good about that, right? And felt good that we had people to talk to. And so that part is good. But the fundamental underlying stuff here is yucky and hard. And I, first of all, want to shout out, we want Zach to be, in this conversation, because something we really wanted to be always doing is that musicians have to be centered in this conversation, and we talk about musicians, we talk about venue workers, we talk about audiences. But, ultimately, this is about musicians and what music means for us as human beings, and the fact that this has been lost throughout this pandemic in so many ways. And how do we make sure that musicians and artists are really put at the center? The second piece is we were so blown away by the generosity and the kindness of so many different types of people to come into these conversations. So Zach, when he's not, making records and playing rock shows and getting to do that part of his life, is a principal in a creative firm named Plazma, who came together on behalf of Revs and donated a significant amount of time helping us be thought partners. And how do we talk about this? How do we communicate this? They made a video for us. They really were, it was amazing for Zach and his team to come in and just volunteer their time and be in the game, be here with us. So, Zach, I'm so happy that you're able to join us, and so shout out to Plazma, and thanks to, your crew for doing that. And let's start though with the hard stuff, because now, here we are 19 months in, things are still not great for many musicians, right?
Yeah. You're hearing me okay, right?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of musicians out there, and people have always had a lot of different ways of doing things, and the scale of which is highly varied. I can only speak to my own experience, or peers of mine, friends of mine in the industry, and there's this kind of ripple effect that's just so far and wide. And it's hard for me sometimes to also divorce that also from the other side of business, which has to do with streaming. And, there's a lot of ways, so as a musician, I calculate my perception of things through, all of those things, but purely through the live lens. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a big problem. And so many people I know have either just put everything on hold for a long time, or they had to stop midstream when they were trying to get things going again. And and there's an inertia, right, that happens too, where you feel like, well, what is the point in continuing this? Because when will I ever really feel safe? Yeah. I think there's a trauma, right, that's part of this as well, that everyone has experienced on every side, and as a musician, I think especially when you're singing, sometimes there's this vulnerability you have inherently when you're performing, that you're really open emotionally, you're kind of raw, and you're singing. And when in your mind, there's been this airborne virus, it's really hard to kind of get past that hump, especially when, there's breakthrough and all these sorts of things. And I think there's also, there's this kind of, if you're in a venue where there's, all these precautions are being taken, you can feel safe in that, but there's also the trauma portion where, will I ever really feel safe again? So I think a lot of us are kind of asking those questions, and, or the people that have done one-offs where they've just played outside, like, oh, I feel pretty safe again because I'm outside, so, it's a challenge, it's a challenging thing. And, I know personally, I can only speak for myself, but, I've put a lot of stuff on hold. I was planning some touring, and I just kind of pushed the pause button on it. And so I've been in a real kind of in that sort of state, and I've kind of focused my efforts on just waiting, and kind of doing, like I said, I've been doing a lot of work with Plazma as a result of that, which has been, professionally, that's been great too. But on the musical side, it's felt like this alien world that I'm like drifting in space, and it's getting farther and farther away from me because of these kind of systemic risks and problems. And I don't mean to sound like a downer and to any way minimize the incredible work of Revs and Neva and all these incredible groups that have been trying to band together, even given all of this all these problems. And it's incredible. But the task is daunting. And when I read a statistic, I think it was even this morning, about just how much of the workforce has been reduced, 60% or, these incredible numbers, But as a musician, I feel like my back has always been up against the wall, no matter.
And I think that's the point. And I clearly don't want to be sanctimonious or whatever, but I mean, we keep coming back to this, that many people in music advocacy, and you've been a part of this community for a long time, you know, we've done this work because these are real challenges and they're real structural issues that need to be addressed. And we can't just, again, you know, say, hey, you know, everybody's back and up and running and playing shows again and we're good, you know, because we're not. And, you know, and I think that goes across the board. So, you know, but we're just, we're so appreciative of, again, you and the Plazma team. And again, you're kind of standing in today for a lot of musicians and creatives that dove into this process with a lot of vulnerability and a lot of just, you know, being present in terms of like, how do we do this? And how do we, again, make sure that musicians are not just seen as sort of, you know, economic cogs, like we're going to get everything back and open. And of course, musicians are going to come and do their thing because that's what they do. Right. And it's a much more complicated set of conversations.
Well, I do know this, that, you know, I personally, I'm sorry, I think you were going to ask another question, but I just want to say, you know, I hadn't even gone to a show, like literally gone to watch a show in like almost 2 years, you know, basically. And I went this past weekend. I live in the Bay Area, California Bay Area, and there's this wonderful event they have called We Chica, which is at a winery nearby, and the curation is incredible. And the headliner was Yola Tango, and they're one of my all-time favorite bands. And, you know, they've been around for like 40 years, if you can believe that. But, you know, as they were playing, you know, I was remembering what the guiding light is, you know, the way you feel when a band like that is really laying into it and explode. They closed with Heroin, you know, the Velvet Underground song. And you know, I do know what the big picture here, and I do know what that guiding light is. And I do know how I feel when I'm in the presence of greatness like that, and how I feel personally, the gratitude that I feel towards my fellow band members when I'm in the middle, when we are collectively in the middle of a song live. And I haven't forgotten that. You know, it's just a question of getting back to it and feeling good. Yeah.
Nice. Well, how are you feeling? You mind me putting you on the spot and asking if you'll close us out with something? No,
that's okay. When you sent me the message, I thought about, you know, if I'm going to play a song, you know, what would be appropriate, you know, and so I was thinking I would do a cover, if that's all right with you.
That's all right. So Zach's going to close this part of the session out with a song. We're going to then leave this Zoom and stop recording, and anybody who's able to join us in a few minutes for some social time and happy hour, we'd love to see you. Thanks again to all of our guests. Thanks as always to Alex Dolvin. Thanks to all of our Revs leaders and participants. It's been some of the best work we've done and some of the hardest work that we've done. And we're just really proud and thankful for everybody. So Zach's going to take us out with a song. We're going to wrap things up and we'll see y'all on the other side. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah. And this song is by one of my all-time favorite bands. And I hope that I'm just going to fix the sound real quick. I hope it sounds okay. It's always challenging when you're routing sound through Zoom, as many of you know, but it's one of my favorite bands called Spiritualized. And I never want to put the words in the mouth of someone else, but I feel like in many ways, even though it's an older song, it is emblematic of many things, and sticking to it and going back to it. Hold on a sec. Hey. I hope I'm doing okay. Yeah, it's okay. So this is an older song of theirs called Do It All Over Again. Hope we're hearing the guitar. You gotta hope for the best, with the best looks good now, baby. And I don't think a few words of sympathy are gonna make your world go round. I'm sitting here looking at the TV and burning holes in everything that I get. You better come right down and do it all over again. You better come right down and do it all over again. You better come right down and do it all over again.
I love you like I love the sun in the morning, but I don't think a few words of mine are gonna make you change your mind. I'm gonna spend the day in bed and I'm planning on sleeping my life away. You better come right down and do it all over again. You better come right down and do it all over again. You better come right down and do it all over again. Gotta hope for the best, and the best looks great now, baby. And I don't think a few words of mine are gonna make your world go round. I'm sitting here looking at the TV and burning holes in everything that I get. You better come right down and do it all over again. You better come right down and do it all over again. You better come right down. Come right down and do it all over again.
All right.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Alex. We'll see you all who have been able to join on the other side.
Thanks, Michael.